Mark stood frozen at the entrance of the wedding venue, his rented suit feeling suddenly too tight around his collar. The elegant decorations and smiling guests blurred before his eyes as panic set in. He shouldn't have come. What was he thinking, showing up to his ex-wife's cousin's wedding alone? But before he could retreat to his car, a familiar voice called out from behind. "Mark, wait up!" It was Diana from next door, waving frantically as she hurried toward him in a flowing blue dress. That moment would change everything, but not in the way either of them could have possibly imagined. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us all of the unexpected ways life can surprise us when we least expect it. 3 years earlier, Mark Sullivan had been living what he thought was the perfect life. A beautiful home in the suburbs, a successful career as an architect, and a marriage he believed would last forever. Then came the divorce papers, followed by the crushing reality of becoming a single father to 7-year-old Emma. The separation had been amicable enough, they simply grew apart, as the cliché went, but the aftermath left Mark adrift, struggling to balance work deadlines with school pickups and learning to braid Emma's hair before morning classes. Diana Chen had moved in next door 6 months after the divorce was finalized. A pediatric nurse with a quick laugh and an even quicker wit, she'd introduced herself with a homemade lasagna and practical advice about the neighborhood. Mark had been grateful but cautious, building walls around himself that he believed were necessary to protect what remained of his broken family. "Emma talks about you all the time," Diana had mentioned casually one day while they were both collecting mail. "She says you make the best pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." Mark had smiled despite himself. "They're more like blobs with tails, but she's generous with her compliments." Their friendship developed slowly over shared fence conversations and occasional emergency babysitting when Mark's carefully constructed schedule fell apart. Diana never pushed for more, respecting the invisible boundaries he had established. The wedding invitation had arrived unexpectedly. Mark's ex-wife Caroline had called to explain that her cousin Melissa specifically wanted Emma to be there. The little girl had been promised a junior bridesmaid role before the divorce, and Melissa didn't want to break that promise. Caroline would be bringing her new boyfriend, which made Mark's stomach twist uncomfortably. "You should come too," Caroline had added awkwardly. "Emma would love it, and Melissa said it's fine. We're all adults here, right?" Mark had agreed for Emma's sake, but as the date approached, his anxiety mounted. Emma would be with Caroline for the ceremony portion, leaving Mark to navigate the reception alone, a prospect that filled him with dread. Social situations had become increasingly difficult since the divorce, his confidence eroded by the failure of his marriage. The morning of the wedding, Emma had twirled in her lavender dress, excitement radiating from her face. "You look beautiful, Daddy," she'd said, reaching up to straighten his tie with small, determined fingers. "Are you excited for the party?" He'd forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. It'll be great." But after dropping Emma off with Caroline for the pre-wedding preparations, Mark had sat in his car for nearly 20 minutes, contemplating driving home instead. Only the thought of disappointing his daughter had propelled him to the venue. And now here he was, one foot already retreating toward the parking lot when Diana's voice stopped him. "I didn't know you were coming to this wedding," she said, slightly breathless from hurrying in heels. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, revealing earrings that caught the afternoon sunlight. Mark stared at her in confusion. "How are you here? Do you know Melissa?" Diana laughed. "I'm her colleague from the hospital. We work in the same department." She tilted her head, studying his face. "You look like you're about to bolt." "That obvious, huh?" Mark ran a hand through his carefully combed hair. "Emma's with Caroline. I'm solo for the ceremony." Understanding dawned in Diana's eyes. "Well, now you're with me. Come on, wedding buddy." She offered her arm with a smile that somehow made the knot in his chest loosen slightly. The ceremony was beautiful, though Mark barely registered the details. He was too aware of Diana beside him, the subtle scent of her perfume, and the way she discreetly pointed out the bride's brother who had apparently gotten drunk at the rehearsal dinner and fallen into the decorative fountain. When Emma spotted him afterward, she ran across the reception hall, lavender dress fluttering. "Daddy, did you see me? I didn't drop any of the flowers." Mark scooped her up, inhaling the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You were perfect, Em. The star of the show, even better than the bride," Emma whispered conspiratorially. "Well, let's not tell Melissa that," he whispered back, making her giggle. Caroline approached more slowly, her new boyfriend trailing behind. The awkward introduction that followed made Mark's shoulders tense again, but Diana smoothly inserted herself into the conversation, somehow diffusing the tension with questions about Emma's role in the ceremony. "Deanna helps me with my homework sometimes when you have late meetings," Emma informed Mark proudly. "She knows all about fractions." Caroline raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, eventually drifting away with her boyfriend toward other guests. Mark turned to Diana with gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't have to do that." She shrugged. "What are neighbors for? Besides, Emma's right, I am excellent with fractions." The reception progressed, and Mark found himself relaxing for the first time in months. Diana was easy to talk to, drawing him out of his shell with questions about his latest architectural project and amusing hospital stories that made him laugh despite himself. When Emma returned from dancing with her little cousins, she collapsed dramatically into the chair between them. "My feet hurt," she announced. "Dancing is hard work." "The hardest," Diana agreed solemnly. "Almost as hard as fractions." Emma giggled, then looked between them with a thoughtful expression that made Mark nervous. His daughter had developed an alarming directness since the divorce. "You should dance with Diana, Daddy," she declared. "She looks pretty, and you're wearing your fancy shoes." Mark felt heat rise to his face. "Emma, I don't think. I'd love to dance," Diana interrupted, standing and offering her hand with a challenging smile. "Unless those fancy shoes are just for show." Something about her expression, confident, but with a hint of vulnerability, gave Mark the courage to take her hand. As they moved to the dance floor, he leaned close to her ear. "I should warn you, I haven't danced since my own wedding." "Lucky for you, I lead when necessary," she replied, subtly guiding him into the rhythm of the music. They danced through 2 songs, conversation flowing easily between them. Mark found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone. His fears about failing Emma as a single parent, the loneliness of evenings after she went to bed, the house that still felt too empty despite the noise and chaos a 7-year-old brought. Diana listened without judgment, occasionally offering insights from her own life. Her parents' divorce when she was 12, her decision to become a nurse after her grandmother's illness, her failed engagement 3 years earlier to a surgeon who couldn't commit. "We're quite the pair," Mark observed as the music shifted to a slower song. "Both carrying our own baggage. I prefer to think of it as life experience," Deanna countered. "Besides, everyone has baggage. The trick is finding someone whose bags match yours." From across the room, Emma watched them with undisguised interest, giving her father an enthusiastic thumbs up that made both adults laugh. "She's been trying to find me a girlfriend for months," Mark admitted. "Last week she suggested her art teacher, who is happily married and at least 15 years older than me. She has good taste," Diana teased. "Messes. Patterson makes those amazing ceramic mugs at the community center, right? Very practical." As the evening progressed, Mark realized he was genuinely enjoying himself for the first time in years. When Caroline approached to say she was taking Emma home for the night as planned, his daughter hugged him fiercely. "Did you have fun with Diana?" Emma whispered loudly enough for Diana to hear. "I did," Mark answered honestly, "very much." After Emma left, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Without his daughter as a buffer, Mark felt the weight of being at his ex-wife's family wedding return. Diana seemed to sense his discomfort. "Want to get out of here?" she suggested. "There's a diner about 10 minutes away that makes incredible milkshakes." The relief must have shown on his face because she laughed, already gathering her small purse. They slipped out quietly, The cool evening air a welcome change from the stuffy reception hall. The diner was nearly empty, its retro decor and flickering neon sign creating an atmosphere that felt removed from time. They settled into a booth, ordering chocolate milkshakes and sharing a plate of fries. "Thank you," Mark said finally, "for saving me back there. I was about 5 seconds from a full retreat." Diana dipped a fry in her milkshake, ignoring his look of mock horror. "Don't thank me yet. I have ulterior motives." "Oh." Mark's heart rate picked up slightly. "I've been trying to figure out how to ask you out for months," she admitted. "But you always seemed so unavailable. Like you had this force field around you and Emma." Mark considered this. "I guess I did. After the divorce, I was so focused on making sure Emma was okay that I didn't leave much room for anything else." "And now?" Diana asked, her expression carefully neutral. Mark looked at her. Really looked at her, for perhaps the first time. The woman who had brought soup when Emma had the flu. Who had helped him untangle Christmas lights last December. Who always waved from her garden and never pushed when he retreated into his shell. Now I'm sitting in a diner at 11 o'clock at night, watching a beautiful woman dip perfectly good fries into a milkshake and wondering why it took a wedding to make me see what was right next door. Diana's smile was worth every moment of discomfort he'd felt that day. Better late than never, architect man. They talked until the diner closed, walking slowly back to their cars in the now empty wedding venue parking lot. The goodbye was awkward in the way of new beginnings, both wanting more but cautious of rushing. "I'll see you tomorrow," Diana asked. "Emma mentioned you're building a birdhouse." "A very structurally unsound birdhouse," Mark confirmed. "We could use an expert consultant. I know nothing about birdhouses, but I make excellent lemonade." Perfect qualification. The first kiss happened 3 weeks later, after Emma had gone to bed following a movie night where the three of them had built a blanket fort in the living room. It was tentative and brief, but it held promise. 6 months later, when Mark found himself standing in another wedding venue, this time as a guest at his colleague's ceremony, there was no panic, no desire to retreat. Diana's hand was warm in his, and Emma walked ahead of them, proudly showing off her new dress to anyone who would look. "Remember that wedding last year?" Diana murmured as they found their seats. "When you nearly escaped before I could catch you." Mark squeezed her hand. "Best failed escape of my life." As the bride and groom exchanged vows, Mark found himself not watching the ceremony, but studying Diana's profile, the way she blinked back tears at particularly moving moments. Emma sat between them, her small hand occasionally patting Diana's arm when the emotion seemed too much. They had become a unit, the three of them, not replacing what was lost but building something new and unexpected. There were still difficult moments, say. Emma's occasional meltdowns about missing her mother during Mark's custody weeks. Diana's adjustment to the realities of dating a single parent. Mark's lingering insecurities about failure. But there were also pancake Sundays and science project Thursdays and movie nights where Emma fell asleep between them on the couch. There were whispered conversations after Emma's bedtime and morning coffees on the porch and text messages throughout the day that made both of them smile. 1 year to the day after that fateful wedding, Mark stood in his backyard, nervously adjusting the string lights he'd spent hours arranging in the trees. Emma watched from the kitchen window, giving him periodic thumbs up signals as Diana finished her shift at the hospital. When she arrived, clearly confused by the elaborate dinner setup in the yard, Emma could barely contain her excitement, bouncing on her toes beside her father. "What's all this?" Diana asked, taking in the flowers, the candles, the table set for 3. "It's our anniversary," Emma announced proudly. "Daddy said it's the day you saved him from being alone forever." Diana's eyes widened as she looked at Mark. "The wedding, that's our anniversary. The day you shouted my name across that parking lot," Mark confirmed, suddenly nervous. "The day everything changed." Emma tugged at Diana's hand. "He has a question too. A really important one. I helped pick out the box." Diana's hand flew to her mouth as Mark dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma stood beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Deanna Chen," Mark began, his voice steadier than he'd expected. "You walked into our lives when I thought I had everything figured out. When I thought the best I could hope for was to be a good father and nothing more. You showed me that there was room for joy again, for connection, for a future I couldn't have imagined." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Emma and I would be honored if you would officially become part of our family. Will you marry me?" Diana's eyes filled with tears as she looked between them, the man who had slowly opened his heart again, and the little girl who had accepted her with such easy grace. "Yes," she whispered, dropping to her knees to embrace them both. "Yes to both of you." Emma cheered, throwing her arms around them.
"I told Daddy you'd say yes!"
I told him. Later that night, after Emma had finally gone to sleep, exhausted from excitement, Mark and Diana sat on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, the ring catching the moonlight as she moved her hand. "Did you ever think," Diana asked softly, "that day at the wedding, that we'd end up here?" Mark considered the question. "No," he admitted. "I was just trying to survive the day. I couldn't see past my own fear. And now," he turned to look at her, this woman who had shouted his name across a parking lot and changed the trajectory of his life with that single act of courage. "Now I can see everything," he said simply. "And it's beautiful. Sometimes life changes in grand, dramatic ways, earthquakes that shake the very foundation of existence. But more often, it changes in small moments, a neighbor's shout, a dance at a wedding, a shared milkshake in a quiet diner." For Mark Sullivan, a single dad who almost ran away from a wedding, that moment came in the form of Diana Chen, who saw his retreat and called him back, not just to the wedding, but to life itself. And as they sat together on that porch swing, planning their future, Mark understood that the most profound changes often begin with the simplest actions, someone calling your name when you're walking away, and the courage to turn around and answer.